I heard my son say I was useless and should just die, so I sold everything and disappeared with $3.5 million. I just stood there, the tray of glasses trembling in my hands, feeling the world crumble beneath my feet. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell anyone. And if you, for a single second, feel like this sounds familiar, all I ask is that you leave a like and subscribe. It'll help me keep unburdening myself. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 58 years old, and I've lived in New York City for as long as I can remember. My home is in Park Slope, Brooklyn, one of those neighborhoods where the streets smell like artisanal coffee shops, and where pre-war brownstones coexist with modern glass condos that never quite seem to fit in. It's become a trendy area, they say, though for me it has always been simply home. It was a Saturday afternoon when my world fell apart. The day had started like any other. I woke up at 6, as always, brewed a pot of coffee in the kitchen that still has the original subway tiles my mother picked out 30 years ago, and sat at the small dining table to go over the month's bills. Sunlight filtered through the cotton curtains I'd sewn myself, casting golden patterns on the papers spread out before me. My Saturday routine never varied much. After coffee came the Grand Army Plaza Green Market, where I knew all the vendors by name. Carmen always saved me the best heirloom tomatoes, and Mr. Russo would set aside the freshest cuts of beef and pork for the Sunday gravy I made every weekend. It was a tradition I'd kept since Michael was little, though now, at 35, he rarely stayed for dinner. That morning there was something different in the air, a tension I couldn't place, like when you sense it's going to rain but the sky is still clear. Michael had arrived the night before, later than usual, and had left his overnight bag by the door without a word. He'd only mumbled a good night as he climbed the stairs to his old room, which I kept exactly as he'd left it when he moved into his high-rise in the financial district 5 years ago. On Sundays, we always used to go to my sister Helen's house in Scarsdale. It was a family tradition dating back to when our parents were alive. Helen had done well for herself by marrying well. Her husband owned an import-export business that allowed them to maintain a huge house with a landscaped garden and a pool, where the entire extended family would gather for Sunday cookouts. But this Saturday was special. Helen was turning 55, and she'd organized a party in her backyard. Nothing too fancy, she'd told me on the phone. Just close family and a few friends. I'd spent all week thinking about what to get her, checking my savings to buy something nice without neglecting my own bills. The car service dropped us off at the entrance to Helen's house around 4 in the afternoon. October heat in New York can be deceiving. The sun beats down, but the air holds a crispness that hints at winter's approach. I had put on my navy blue dress, the one Michael had given me for Mother's Day 3 years ago, and styled my hair in the low bun I always wear for special occasions. Helen's house had always impressed me, though I'd never told her so. The backyard was especially beautiful, with purple wisteria climbing the fieldstone walls and a small herb garden where Helen grew her own seasonings. Round tables were covered with white linens, and the aroma of catered pulled pork filled the air. Michael had dressed well for the occasion. A crisp white shirt, dark designer jeans, and shoes I knew cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He worked at a financial consulting firm, a job Helen's husband had helped him land through his connections. He was a good boy, he always had been, but in recent years he'd developed a certain distance from me that I attributed to his age and the pressures of adult life. The party went on as usual. Conversations about politics, about the traffic on the Cross Bronx, about prices that never stopped rising. I helped Helen with the details, refilling pitchers of iced tea and lemonade, making sure there were enough warm dinner rolls, checking that everyone had enough on their plates. It was my natural way of participating in these gatherings, being useful, being needed, being the older sister who always takes charge. Around 6 in the evening, as the sun began to set behind the tall oak trees lining the yard, I felt I needed a moment's rest. My legs ached, a consequence of so many years working on my feet, and the noise of the conversations was starting to wear on me. I decided to head toward the back porch, where Helen had a small sitting area with wicker chairs overlooking the garden. I picked up a tray of dirty glasses to take to the kitchen, planning to use the trip to steal a moment of silence. As I walked past the side porch, I heard familiar voices. It was Michael talking to Sam, his friend from college. They were leaning against one of the stone pillars, beers in hand, oblivious to my presence. I didn't mean to listen. I was simply passing by when the words hit me with a brutal clarity, as sharp as broken glass. I swear, Sam. Some days I just wish my mom would die already. She's old, she's useless, just takes up space. I'm sick of it. The world stopped. The tray slipped in my hands, but somehow I managed to hold on before it crashed. My heart started pounding so hard I thought everyone at the party could hear it. The air was knocked out of me. I felt nauseous, as if my stomach had just swallowed poison. My legs trembled so violently I had to lean against the stone wall to keep from falling. The tray of glasses almost escaped my grasp, but instinct kept it steady, my body functioning while my soul collapsed. Besides, Michael continued, with a coldness that sliced through me like a rusty blade, when she's gone, at least I'll get the brownstone in Park Slope and my grandmother's house in the Hamptons. Something good has to come from having to carry her all these years. He wasn't joking. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't angry about some recent argument. He said it with a terrifying calm, like someone discussing the weather or planning a vacation. With the same casualness one might use to talk about buying a newspaper or changing the tires on a car. I stood there, pressed against that wall, unable to move, while the words replayed in my head like a scratched record. Carry her, he had said. I was a burden. After 35 years of being his mother, of working until my back broke, of sacrificing every dollar I earned, every hour of rest, every small personal pleasure, I was a burden he wished would disappear. Sam gave a nervous laugh, the kind of laugh from someone who doesn't know what to say to such a raw confession. Jesus, Mike, that's your mother, man. My mother who never lets me live my life, my son replied, taking a long swig of his beer. Always with the drama, always needing something, always reminding me of everything she's done for me, as if I ever asked her to sacrifice so much. Those words were worse than the first. Not only did he wish for my death, but he blamed my sacrifices as if they were a form of manipulation, as if every night I stayed up mending his school uniforms, every meal I skipped so he could have lunch money, every medicine I didn't buy for myself to pay for his school supplies had been a way to blackmail him. I managed to walk to the kitchen like a sleepwalker. I set the tray down in the sink and gripped the edge of the marble countertop until my knuckles turned white. Helen was cutting the cake, laughing with her friends, completely oblivious to the fact that her sister had just heard her own death sentence pronounced by her only son. "Sarah, are you okay? You look pale," my niece Kate asked, approaching with genuine concern. "I'm just a little tired, sweetie. The heat, you know." I lied with the ease that comes from fresh pain. When the wounds are so new they don't hurt yet, they just numb you. I returned to the garden, sat in one of the white plastic chairs, and the rest of the afternoon passed like a slow-motion film. I watched Michael laugh with his cousins, hug Helen to wish her a happy birthday, help himself to more pulled pork, behaving like the loving son everyone believed him to be. And there I was, watching him, wondering since when he had started seeing me as an obstacle, since when my mother's love had become an unbearable burden for him, since when my gray hairs, my wrinkles, my slow way of walking had become reason enough to wish I would cease to exist. The car ride back was silent. Michael was glued to his phone, texting, probably making plans for his Saturday night with friends. I watched the city streets pass by the window, the BQE, the buildings in Queens, the traffic-clogged FDR Drive, and felt like a stranger in my own life. We arrived at the brownstone in Park Slope around 9. Michael said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek that burned my skin. "I'm leaving early tomorrow, Mom. I have a big meeting on Monday and need to prep." "Of course, honey. Rest well." I watched him go up the stairs to his room, carrying that suitcase he'd brought the night before. I waited until I heard his bedroom door close, and then I allowed myself the luxury of sinking into the living room armchair and closing my eyes. But I didn't cry. I couldn't. Tears need hope to fall. And I had just discovered that the hope I had nurtured for 35 years was an illusion. There were no tears for that. There was only a cold emptiness settling in my chest like a December fog. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen at the table where I had so often helped Michael with his homework, drinking chamomile tea that did nothing to calm me, replaying every moment of our life together, searching for the signs I had ignored. I remembered when Michael was 8 and got pneumonia. I spent 3 weeks sleeping in a chair at Cohen Children's Medical Center, without a change of clothes, surviving on coffee and saltine crackers, praying to every saint I knew to keep my little boy from leaving me. When he finally recovered, the first thing he did when we got home was ask me to buy him the video game he'd seen on the hospital TV. Not a "thank you, Mom." Not a special hug. Just, "Will you buy it for me?" I remembered his high school graduation. I had worked double shifts for months to pay for his senior trip to Miami. I arrived at the ceremony straight from cleaning a house in Larchmont, my hands still smelling of bleach, my work uniform under the blazer Helen had lent me. When they called his name, he scanned the audience. But when his eyes met mine, his smile faded slightly. He later confessed he was embarrassed that I was so working class, compared to his friends' parents. I remembered when he turned 18. I had saved for 2 years to buy him a new laptop, one of the ones he'd been asking for to take to college. I bought a refurbished model from a guy on Canal Street, in perfect condition, and had it wrapped in gold paper. When he opened it, he checked the brand and model, then asked if I had the receipt so he could exchange it for a better one. How had I not seen it before? Every gesture of love I interpreted as maternal. He received as an obligation. Every sacrifice I made with a heart full of tenderness, he saw as a debt he hadn't asked to incur. Sunday morning found me still sitting in that kitchen, surrounded by memories that now stung like shrapnel. Michael came downstairs around 6 a.m., showered and dressed to leave. He had his suitcase and his car keys in hand. "I'm heading out, Mom. See you next week. Don't you want some breakfast? I can make you scrambled eggs the way you like them." "No time. I'll grab something on the road." He gave me another kiss on the cheek, mechanical, automatic, like greeting an acquaintance on the street. And then he was gone. I heard the engine of his Jetta start, the sound fading down the street toward Flatbush Avenue, and I knew that something fundamental in my life had changed forever. It wasn't just what I had heard at Helen's house. It was the confirmation of what I had been refusing to see for years. My son had grown up feeling imprisoned by my love, and now, as an independent adult, he saw me as a dead weight he wanted to be free of. I poured myself another cup of tea and stared out the kitchen window. Sunday was dawning gray over Park Slope, with that leaden sky that promises rain but never delivers. The neighbors were starting their Sunday routines. The man next door watering his small garden, the family upstairs loading up their car to go to church. And there I was, sitting in my kitchen, asking myself for the first time in my adult life, what do I have left if I'm not even valued as a mother? The next few days passed as if I were underwater. Everything reached me muffled, distorted, as if there were a thick pane of glass between me and the rest of the world. I would get up, make coffee, sweep the apartment, cook food I had no appetite for, and go to bed without having truly lived any of those hours. On Tuesday, while sorting through the laundry Michael had left behind, I found a receipt from a restaurant in the meatpacking district. $250 for a single meal, more than I spent on groceries for a whole week. The receipt was dated the previous Friday, the same day I had been counting out quarters to pay for my subway fare. I didn't feel anger. I no longer had room for anger. Just a deep sadness that spread through my body like ink in water. How was it possible that my son, who knew perfectly well that I lived on a shoestring budget, could spend in one dinner what I lived on for a week? On Wednesday, my friend Brenda called. We'd cleaned houses together for 15 years. Her voice sounded worried. "Hey, Sarah, you okay? You seem off. I saw you at the market yesterday, and you looked like you were on another planet." I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain that you've discovered that your only son, the person you've lived for more than half your life, wishes you were dead? How do you put into words that void that has taken up residence in your chest and grows every day like a silent tumor? "I'm fine, Bren. Just a little tired." "You sure? If you need to talk, you know I'm here." Sometimes we carry things alone and they just get heavier. Brenda had that working woman's wisdom, the kind that understands pain without needing long explanations. We had cleaned enormous houses in Scarsdale together, hauled buckets of water up marble staircases, endured humiliations from women who treated us like we were invisible. She knew what it was to live for your children, to sacrifice everything to see them grow up better than you did. We'll talk later, Bren. I can't right now. I hung up before she could insist. Not because I didn't want her company, but because I was afraid that if I started talking, everything I'd been holding inside would burst out like an avalanche, and I wouldn't be able to stop it. On Thursday, a credit card bill for Michael arrived. It was in my name because when he had wanted to get one, he didn't have enough credit history. I had agreed to co-sign, as always, without a second thought. The bill came to my address because he was still officially living with me. A $1,500 balance. Clothes, restaurants, gas, a $200 transaction at an electronics store. All spent in the last month while I was eating refried beans and rice because it was the cheapest meal I could stretch. I sat at the kitchen table with that bill in my hands, and for the first time in days, I felt something other than sadness. It was a strange mix of outrage and clarity, like when you realize you've been scammed for a long time and you finally see the whole con. He didn't just see me as a burden. He was also using me as his personal bank. That same afternoon, I got a text from Michael. "Mom, can you pay the credit card this month? I'm a little tight on cash. I get paid Monday." I read the message 5 times. "Can you pay the credit card?" As if it were a casual favor, like asking to borrow a cup of sugar from a neighbor. As if $1,500 were just loose change I had lying around, waiting for him to need it. I didn't reply immediately. For the first time in his adult life, I let him wait for my answer. Friday morning, as I drank my coffee and looked out the kitchen window, I realized something terrible. I no longer recognized my own home. Every corner, every object, every photograph spoke to me of a woman I no longer was. The woman who had lived for 35 years proud to be a mother, happy to sacrifice, convinced she was building something beautiful. The living room where I had helped Michael with his math homework, explaining problems I barely understood, but researched at the library so I could teach him. The dining room where we had celebrated every one of his birthdays, always with his favorite cake, even if it meant I only ate the leftover slivers. The kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals thinking of his tastes, his schedules, his needs. All of it was still there, but the woman who had given meaning to those spaces had died last Saturday at Helen's house. What was left was just a ghost, moving among the wreckage of a life that no longer existed. A full week had passed since the revelation. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Go out alone, with no specific purpose, no shopping list, no responsibilities to fulfill. I put on my brown dress, the one I saved for special occasions but never wore because there were no special occasions in my life, and I walked aimlessly through the streets of Park Slope. I ended up in Prospect Park, sitting on a bench under a large oak tree that was beginning to lose its autumn leaves. It was mid-afternoon, and families were having picnics. Young couples were taking photos. Children were running while their mothers chased them with snacks and wet wipes. I watched a woman my age playing with her granddaughter, a little girl of about 4 who was laughing as she swung from her grandmother's arms. The grandmother lifted her carefully, fixed her hair, and wiped her face with infinite tenderness. And the little girl looked at her with those bright eyes of someone who knows they are loved unconditionally. I was never going to have grandchildren, not because Michael couldn't have them, but because when he did, I would still be that burden he wanted to get rid of. His children would grow up hearing him complain about his annoying grandmother, the old woman who didn't know when it was her time to die. That image broke something inside me that had managed to stay whole until then. It wasn't just my 35 years of motherhood that Michael had discarded. It was my future, too. My old age. The years I had left to live, which he saw as wasted time instead of time to be shared. I returned home as it was getting dark. The apartment greeted me with its usual silence, but now that silence had a different weight. It was no longer the comfortable quiet of a home waiting to be filled with life. It was the emptiness of a place where someone was no longer welcome. I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the living room, in front of the bookshelf where I kept the family photos. There was Michael at 5, dressed as a superhero at a birthday party, hugging me with a smile that was genuine back then. At 10, on his first communion day, posing with me outside a church in the village. At 15, at his middle school graduation, when he still introduced me to his friends without shame. At what point had I stopped being his hero and become his burden? When had he started to see my wrinkles as reminders of his own mortality? When had my gray hair become an embarrassment and my love transformed into pressure? I picked up the photo from his college graduation, the last one where we both looked truly happy. That had been the proudest day of my life, seeing my son receive his bachelor's degree in business, knowing I had managed to give him the education I never had, feeling that all my sacrifices had been worth it. Now, looking at that photo, I wondered if he would have preferred I wasn't there that day. If my presence, my dress bought at a thrift store, my comfortable but unfashionable shoes, had been a source of discomfort for him instead of pride. I put the photo down on the table and went to my bedroom. I lay down fully clothed without even brushing my teeth because none of that seemed to matter anymore. From my window, I could see the building across the street, where a family I knew by sight lived. I would see them at night, eating dinner together, talking, laughing. Adult children who visited their parents not out of obligation, but out of love. I stayed awake late into the night, listening to the sounds of the city that never truly sleeps. Cars driving down Flatbush Avenue, distant music from a party, the wail of a passing siren. Sounds that had been the soundtrack of my life for decades, but now sounded like farewells. Because I was beginning to understand something that both terrified and liberated me. If Michael wanted me to disappear, maybe it was time to consider giving him exactly what he was asking for. Not in the way he expected, but in a way that would give me back the dignity I had lost without even realizing it. The following Sunday dawned with a fine rain that fogged up the windows and filled the air with that smell of wet earth I had always loved. But that morning, not even the rain could touch anything inside me. It was as if I had lost the ability to feel pleasure in the simple things that used to brighten my day. Michael hadn't answered my 3 missed calls from the day before, nor had he replied to the message where I asked if he was coming for lunch, as we sometimes used to do. The silence of his absence filled the apartment in a way I had never experienced before. I decided to make his favorite Sunday gravy anyway. It had been his favorite dish since he was a child, and I had the foolish hope that the smell would draw him in, that he would show up unannounced as he used to when he lived with me. I bought everything at the Green Market. The pork ribs, the San Marzano tomatoes, the fresh basil. I spent the whole morning cooking with the same care as always. I browned the meat until it was perfect, simmered the tomatoes until they released that deep red color I knew he loved, and made a fresh salad to go with it. The kitchen filled with aromas that normally would have made me feel useful, needed, a good mother. But he didn't come. At 2 in the afternoon, with the table set for 2 and the pot of gravy simmering on the stove, I had to accept that I had cooked for no one. I served myself a small portion, though I wasn't hungry, and ate in silence while watching families hurry past under the rain, rushing to get to their homes where someone was waiting for them. The meal tasted like sadness. Every bite was a reminder of all the Sundays I had cooked with hope, waiting for Michael to come and enjoy what I had prepared with so much love. How many times had I canceled plans, turned down invitations, just to stay home and cook for him? Food that he sometimes didn't even taste. Around 4, my phone rang. My heart leaped, thinking it was Michael, but it was Helen. "Sarah, how are you? I haven't seen you since my birthday. Is everything okay?" "Yes, Helen, I'm fine. How are you doing after the party?" "Great, so happy. Hey, I wanted to ask you something. Last Saturday, after you guys left, Sam mentioned something strange. He said Michael told him you were thinking of selling the brownstone. Is that true?" My breath caught in my throat. Not only had he wished for my death, but he was also inventing stories about my assets, preparing the ground for when I was no longer there. "No, Helen. I haven't thought about selling anything. Why would I?" "Oh, I don't know. Sam said Michael was very worried because you'd apparently told him you wanted to move to a smaller place, that you were tired of maintaining such a big house by yourself." My son's lies were spreading like an oil slick. He didn't just want me dead. He was also planting the idea among the family that I was a financial burden, an old woman who could no longer take care of herself and needed to get rid of her property. "Helen, I have never said that to Michael. This brownstone is my home. I've lived here for 30 years. That's so weird then. Maybe Sam misunderstood. You know how men are with gossip. But I knew Sam hadn't misunderstood. Michael was preparing the family for the day I was gone. making sure everyone believed the sale of my properties had been my idea, my decision, not something he had orchestrated. After hanging up with Helen, I sat in the living room, staring at the walls I had painted with my own hands, the furniture I had bought dollar by dollar, the curtains I had sewn in the early mornings when Michael was little and slept in the next room. Was this brownstone also a burden to him? Did he wish for it to disappear along with me? Monday morning was gray and cold. I got up later than usual because I'd spent another sleepless night, turning over Helen's words, Michael's lies, the growing feeling that my own life had become an inconvenience for the only person in the world who mattered to me. I decided to do something I hadn't done in months, go for a walk in Prospect Park. I needed to get out of these four walls that felt more and more like a prison than a home. At the park, I ran into Mrs. Gable, a neighbor from down the street who had 3 grown children, all married. She was sitting on a bench, feeding the stray cats that always gathered near the fountain. "Oh, Sarah, it's so good to see you. How's Michael? I haven't seen him around the neighborhood in a long time." "He's well, Mrs. Gable. You know how it is, always busy with work." "Of course, dear. But he must be so happy with everything you've done for him. My kids always tell me they admire how you raised that boy all on your own. That not just any mother could have done what you did." Her words hurt more than any insult. Mrs. Gable saw me as the model mother, the woman who had succeeded in raising her son alone, the one who deserved respect and admiration. But my own son saw me as a nuisance, as dead weight, as someone who should disappear so he could live in peace. "He's doing great. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. So when is he going to give us some grandchildren? He's at that age, isn't he?" The question pierced me like a dagger. Grandchildren I would never know because to Michael I would be an embarrassing grandmother, a burden he would prefer to keep far away from his new family. Grandchildren who would grow up hearing that their grandmother was a nuisance to be rid of. "Not yet, Mrs. Gable. He's focused on his career." I said goodbye quickly and headed home before the tears I had been holding back for days finally spilled in public. But even in the privacy of my apartment, I couldn't cry. It was as if I had a knot in my throat that wouldn't let the pain out, only let me swallow it and feel it fester inside. That afternoon, a manila envelope arrived. It was from a law firm. Inside were documents I didn't fully understand, but they mentioned estate planning and inheritance. At the bottom of the letter was a handwritten note. "Mrs. Miller, your son contacted us to begin the process of property transfer. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience." My hands trembled so much that the papers fell to the floor. Michael hadn't just lied to the family about my supposed intentions to sell. He had already contacted lawyers. He was already moving pieces to get his hands on my properties before I was even dead. Was he so sure I was going to die soon? Or was he planning something to speed up the process? Fear washed over me like ice water. For the first time since I'd heard his terrible words at Helen's house, I felt something beyond sadness. I felt real terror of my own son. I couldn't stay home that night. I grabbed my purse, went out, and walked aimlessly through the streets of Park Slope until my feet ached. I ended up in a small church on a side street where a 7 o'clock mass was being held. I sat in the back pew, not because I was particularly religious, but because I needed to be in a place where I felt safe. During the service, looking at the simple altar and listening to the prayers of the people around me, I understood something terrible and liberating at the same time. My son didn't just want me dead. He was willing to do what was necessary to make it happen soon. And in the meantime, he was making sure he would get everything I had built. It wasn't just a lack of love. It was something much worse. It was a calculated form of cruelty that had been growing in silence for years, while I lived blindly, believing that being a mother meant loving without limits and without questions. When I left the church, it was completely dark. The streets were full of people heading home from work, hurrying to where someone was waiting for them with dinner on the table and questions about their day. I returned to my empty apartment, my reheated meal, my cold bed, knowing that the man I had dedicated my life to was not only never waiting for me, but was counting the days until he could get rid of me forever. And for the first time in weeks, that certainty didn't bring me sadness. It brought me something I had lost a long time ago: absolute clarity about what I had to do. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling. For the first time in weeks, I didn't lie in bed replaying the horrors of the previous day. I got up with a purpose, as if something inside me had made a decision while I slept. The first thing I did was call the law firm that had sent the documents. The receptionist put me through to a Mr. Hernandez, who explained in a professional but uncomfortable tone that my son had requested advice on expediting inheritance processes due to the advanced age of the property owner. "Excuse me, Mr. Hernandez, but I am 58 years old and in perfect health. I am not dying, nor do I have any intention of transferring anything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Miller, your son informed us that you had expressed concerns about your health situation, and wanted to get everything in order. My son lied to you, Mr. Hernandez. I have no illness, and I have not requested your services. I would appreciate it if you would close any file you have opened in my name." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling, but with something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. For the first time in weeks, I had put a stop to something I didn't want to happen. That same morning, I went to the bank. I asked the manager who had helped me for years, Mr. Jimenez, to review all the accounts where Michael was listed as a beneficiary or had access. There were more than I remembered. The savings account I had opened for him when he turned 18, the credit card in my name that he used, an investment account we had opened together years ago. "I want to remove my son from all of these accounts, Mr. Jimenez. I want all his access revoked." The man looked at me in surprise. He had watched Michael grow up, known him since he was a little boy I would bring to the bank to deposit his first savings. "Are you sure, Mrs. Miller? It's a process that, once done, requires both signatures to reverse." "I'm completely sure." I signed paper after paper, each signature feeling like closing a door I had kept open for years. The credit card was canceled immediately. The joint accounts became individual accounts. The access Michael had to my financial statements was revoked. When I left the bank, I had a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it wasn't the suffocating sadness of the past few weeks either. It was something like the relief you feel when you finally take off a shoe that's been hurting you all day. I walked to the corner diner and sat in a booth. I ordered a black coffee and a pastry, something I hadn't done in years because I always considered such expenses frivolous luxuries I couldn't afford. But that day, I allowed myself, and I savored every sip as if it were the first time I'd tasted real coffee. While I was sitting there, looking out the window at the people passing by on the street, a woman my age approached me. It was Mary Beth, a neighbor from a few buildings down whom I sometimes saw at the market. "Sarah, what a coincidence seeing you here. How are you, dear?" "I'm fine, Mary Beth. Just taking a little break." "Hey, I'm so glad I ran into you. I wanted to ask you something. My sister is looking for work, house cleaning, and I remembered you had so much experience with that. Do you know of any places that might need someone?" The question surprised me. It had been so long since I thought of myself as someone with valuable experience, as someone whose knowledge could help others. "Of course, Mary Beth. I know several families who are always looking for trustworthy people. Tell your sister to call me, and I'll pass along some contacts." "Oh, thank you so much. My sister will be thrilled. Honestly, you were always so hardworking, so responsible. Everyone in the neighborhood knows that." Her words were like a balm on an open wound. Someone else in the world, besides me, recognized my value, my effort, my years of honest work. When I got home that afternoon, the apartment felt different. It was still the same space, but I inhabited it differently. I was no longer the woman waiting for her son to need her. I was a woman who had made decisions, who had set boundaries, who had defended what was hers. Around 6, my phone rang. It was Michael, and his voice was agitated. "Mom, what did you do?" "The bank just called me and said you canceled my credit card." "That's right." "What do you mean, that's right? Why would you do that without telling me?" "Because it's my card, honey. It's in my name, and I pay the bills. But I need it. I have expenses, commitments. You can't just cancel it like that." His indignation confirmed something I had been suspecting. Michael had taken it for granted that my resources were his by right, not by my generosity. The card wasn't a favor I did for him. In his mind, it was something he deserved, and I was obligated to provide. "Michael, if you need a credit card, you can get one yourself. You have a job. You have an income. Are you crazy? Do you know what the interest rates are on new cards? Do you know how hard it is to get one with a good credit limit? Well, it was just as hard for me when I got my first one 20 years ago, working as a house cleaner. He was silent for a few seconds. I could feel his frustration traveling through the phone. I don't get what's wrong with you, Mom. You've been acting so weird lately. Is someone putting ideas in your head? No one is putting anything in my head, Michael. I'm just putting my life in order. Putting your life in order? But you and I have always handled everything together. We're family. The word family in his mouth sounded false, like something he said for convenience but didn't truly feel. I remembered his words at Helen's house, his wish for my death, his lies to the lawyers. Family isn't about one person using the other, honey. Using? What do you mean using? I have never used you. Michael, I have to go. I'm tired. Wait, Mom. We need to talk about this. I'm coming over on Saturday and we'll clear up this whole misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding. I hung up before he could reply. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something that felt like power. Like the satisfaction of having spoken my mind without apologizing or explaining myself further than necessary. That night, I ate dinner alone. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel lonely. I had defended myself. I had set boundaries. I had said no. And the world hadn't ended. After dinner, I opened my ledger and started doing the math. I wanted to know exactly how much money I had spent on Michael in recent years. It took hours of reviewing bank statements, saved receipts, credit card bills. The final number left me breathless. In the last 5 years, since Michael had started working, I had spent over $75,000 on him. Dinners at restaurants he chose, clothes he needed, utility payments for his apartment when he was a little tight on cash, gas for his car, gifts for his girlfriends. $75,000 that I had saved penny by penny, working from dawn to dusk, eating beans so I could afford luxuries that he considered normal, and all that time, he had been wishing for my death. I closed the ledger and sat at the kitchen table, under the yellow light of the bulb that I'd needed to change for months but never did, because there was always something more urgent to spend money on. For the first time, I asked myself, what would my life have been like if I had spent that $75,000 on myself? What if, instead of financing the comfort of an ungrateful son, I had invested in my own happiness, my own future, my own dreams? It was too late to change the past, but maybe it wasn't too late to change the future. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. No nightmares, no waking up at 3 a.m. with a racing heart. I slept the deep sleep of someone who had started to take back control of her own life. The next day, I woke up early, but not with the usual dread. I woke up with energy, with a desire to continue putting my world in order, to keep closing doors that had been open for too long to people who didn't deserve it. Saturday arrived like a forecasted storm. I knew from the moment I woke up that this day would define everything that came after. Michael had confirmed via text that he would be there at 2 p.m. to clear up the misunderstanding about the canceled card. His words sounded more like a threat than an invitation to talk. I got up with enough time to tidy the house and mentally prepare for what I knew would be the most difficult conversation of my life. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't shaking with fear. There was something different about me. A strange calm that came from knowing exactly where I stood. I decided to make lasagna bolognese from scratch, the most elaborate dish I knew how to make, the one that took all morning to prepare. Not because I wanted to please Michael, but because I needed to keep my hands busy while I organized everything I had to say to him in my mind. As I slow-cooked the sauce and rolled out the fresh pasta, I remembered the first time I had made it for him. He was 12 and had gotten an A in math after months of struggling with fractions. I had worked overtime all week to buy the expensive ingredients and spent 2 days preparing every detail. When he tasted it, he just said, "It's good," and went to play video games. Now, 23 years later, I understood that this had been one of the first signs I had chosen to ignore. My son had learned from a young age that my efforts were a given, not something that deserved thanks or recognition. At 2 o'clock sharp, I heard a key in the lock. Michael had always had keys to the brownstone, another of those comforts I had given him without a second thought. He walked in without knocking, as if it were his house, not mine. "Good afternoon, Mom." His greeting was formal, distant. He was wearing an expensive shirt and pants I recognized because I'd seen the charge on the bill for his canceled credit card. $100 just for that shirt. "Good afternoon, honey. Are you hungry? I made lasagna." "I didn't come to eat. I came to talk." He sat down on the living room sofa as if he were about to preside over a board meeting. I remained standing, leaning against the doorframe separating the living room from the kitchen, holding my ground. "Mom, I need you to explain what's going on with you. First, you cancel my card without telling me. Then you tell the bank to remove my access to the accounts. And now I find out you also called the lawyers to cancel the process I had initiated." "There's nothing to explain, Michael. They are my accounts, my money, my properties. I have the right to manage them as I see fit. But we've always managed everything together. You've never been so selfish." The word selfish hit me like a slap, but this time it didn't hurt. It enraged me. For 35 years I had been the opposite of selfish, and now that I was starting to think of myself, he accused me of it. "Selfish, Michael? Selfish for managing my own money? Selfish for not thinking about me, about my needs. I have expenses, commitments. You can't just cut me off from resources like this. My resources or your resources?" He was quiet for a moment, as if he didn't understand the difference. "They're family resources, Mom. You and I are family." "Ah, now we're family. How interesting. What's that supposed to mean?" This was it. Everything I had been carrying for weeks, all the pain, all the disappointment, all the contained rage, rose in my throat like lava from a volcano. "What I mean, Michael, is that I heard what you said at Helen's house. I heard you say you wish I were dead. I heard you say I'm a burden to you. I heard you say the only good thing I can do for you is die so you can get my properties." His face fell completely. The color drained from his cheeks, and for the first time in years, I saw something like genuine fear in his eyes. "Mom, that wasn't... You misunderstood?" "What did I misunderstand, Michael? Did I misunderstand when you told Sam you wished I would just die already? Did I misunderstand when you said I'd just take up space? Did I misunderstand when you said something good had to come from having to carry me?" Every word I repeated was like a knife I was plunging into myself, but it was also like removing a tumor that had been growing in silence. I needed to get it all out, put it on the table, force him to see what he had done. "Mom, I was upset that day. I'd had problems at work. I'd been drinking. You weren't drunk, Michael. And even if you had been, is that your excuse? That when you drink, the truth about what you really think of me comes out?" He got up from the sofa and started pacing the living room like a caged animal. "Fine. Yes. I said those things. But I didn't mean them. Everyone says things when they're frustrated. Does everyone wish for their mother's death when they're frustrated? It wasn't like that. I don't want you to die. I just sometimes feel like you put a lot of pressure on me, that you're always there, always needing something, always reminding me of what you've done for me. When was the last time I asked you for anything, Michael?" He was silent. "When was the last time I called you to ask for a favor? For money? For help with anything?" He remained silent. "When was the last time I reminded you of what I've done for you?" "Mom, it's not that." "Then tell me what it is. Explain to me exactly how I pressure you. Explain what I need from you that you find so suffocating." He sat down again, but this time not like a boss, but like a scolded child. It's that you're always there, always available, always expecting me to come for dinner, to call, to visit, and it makes me feel guilty when I don't. So the problem isn't what I do. The problem is what you don't do, and how that makes you feel. I didn't say that. You just did, Michael. You blame me for being available to you. You blame me for loving you unconditionally. You blame me for waiting for you without demanding anything. And when you don't reciprocate, instead of feeling bad about yourself, you'd rather wish I would disappear so you don't have to deal with that guilt. The words came out of my mouth with a clarity that surprised me. It was as if, during weeks of silence, I had been organizing these thoughts. And now that I was finally saying them out loud, everything made perfect sense. "Mom, I don't want you to disappear." "No? Then explain why you contacted lawyers to transfer my properties." Explain why you told them I was sick and wanted to get everything in order. He turned pale again. How do you know about that? Because they called me, Michael. Because unlike what you might believe, I am not senile or stupid. I know exactly what's going on. I wanted to make sure everything was in order in case something happened to you, in case something happened to me, or in case you made something happen to me. Mom, how can you say that? I would never hurt you. No? Then what is this you've been doing to me for years? What is it like to live knowing your only son wishes you were dead? What is it like to discover that all your love has been wasted on someone who sees you as an obstacle? I broke. For the first time in weeks, the tears I had been holding back came flooding out. But they weren't the tears of a victim. They were tears of liberation, of someone who had finally put all the cards on the table. Michael moved toward me as if to comfort me, but I held up a hand. No, don't touch me. Don't pretend you care when you've just confirmed that everything I heard was true. Mom, we can fix this. No, Michael, we can't. Because this isn't something that broke suddenly. This is something that was built over years, day after day, every time you took my love for granted, every time you received without thanking, every time you saw me as a provider instead of a person. I wiped my tears and looked him straight in the eye. I don't want to be your mother anymore, Michael. I don't want to carry the pain of loving someone who sees me as a burden. I don't want to live for someone who would rather I were dead. Mom, don't say that. I'm saying it because it's the truth. Starting today, you're going to get what you always wanted. You're going to live as if I no longer exist. But you will not inherit anything. You will not profit from my living death. I went to my bedroom and took an envelope from the dresser that I had prepared that morning. Inside were the new keys to the brownstone and a letter I had written to him. Your keys. I've already changed the locks. And this letter explains that I have decided to donate all my properties to a foundation that helps elderly women abandoned by their families. His eyes widened. What? Are you insane? You can't do that? Of course I can. It's my life, my money, my decision. But I'm your son. No. You are a stranger who happened to be born from my body, but who never learned how to be a son. Sons love, respect, and care. You only consume. Mom, please. We can talk about this. I can change. 35 years too late, Michael. He just stood there, the envelope in his hands, staring at me as if he couldn't believe what was happening. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. A life without me. I opened the apartment door and stepped aside. I hope you'll be very happy, young man, for what he was looking for. He walked out in a daze, still unable to process what had just happened. Before he closed the door, I shouted, "And Michael, don't you forget, you got your wish. As of today, to you, I'm dead." I shut the door and slid the deadbolt. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely alone, and for the first time in years, it didn't scare me. It gave me peace. The first few days after closing that door were the quietest of my life. But it was a different kind of silence than what I had experienced in the preceding weeks. It was no longer the painful emptiness of feeling ignored and despised. It was the silence full of possibility of someone who had reclaimed her freedom. On Sunday, I woke up without the usual anxiety of wondering if Michael would come for lunch. He wouldn't. He no longer had a key. He no longer had access to my life. For the first time in decades, my Sunday belonged entirely to me. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Cook only for myself. Not a large pot of something, hoping someone would show up to share it, but exactly what I wanted to eat. I made myself sunny-side-up eggs with sourdough toast and sat at the dining table with the newspaper spread out, enjoying every bite without rushing, without worrying if someone else was hungry. The phone rang several times over the weekend. Michael, as expected. I didn't answer a single call. A few text messages also arrived, which I read but didn't reply to. Mom, please, we have to talk. You can't be serious. This is crazy. Call me. Every unanswered message gave me more strength. I had spent my entire life responding immediately to his every call, rushing to solve any problem he had, anticipating his needs before he even identified them himself. Now he was experiencing what it was like to not be anyone's priority, and judging by his desperate messages, He didn't like it one bit. On Monday, I went downtown to handle the paperwork for the foundation I had mentioned to Michael. It hadn't been an empty threat or an impulsive decision. During the weeks of pain, I had been researching options and had found an organization that helped elderly women in situations of family abandonment. It was called the Silver Circle Foundation and was run by a 70-year-old woman who had gone through something similar. The office was in an old but dignified building near Union Square. The director, Eleanor Vance, received me with the warmth of someone who understands pain without needing long explanations. "Mrs. Miller, it's a pleasure to meet you. You told me a bit about your situation on the phone, but I'd like you to tell me in more detail how we can help you." "Actually, Mrs. Vance, I'm not here for help. I'm here to offer it." I explained my situation. The brownstone in Park Slope, the house in the Hamptons I had inherited from my mother, my life savings, everything I had built working since I was 18, which my son saw as his guaranteed inheritance. "I want to donate everything, but on one condition, that it be used specifically for women who have been abandoned by their children, so they know they're not alone, that there's someone who understands how it feels." Mrs. Vance looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Sarah, are you completely sure about this decision? It's very generous, but it's also very final. I'm more sure of this than anything else I've ever done in my life." That afternoon, I walked out of the lawyer's office with all the papers signed. My properties now belonged to the Silver Circle Foundation. Michael could wish for my death all he wanted, but he wasn't going to profit a single dollar from it. On Tuesday, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years: visit my friend Brenda. She lived in Astoria, Queens, in a small but cozy house that always smelled of freshly brewed coffee and the flowers she grew in pots all over her patio. "Sarah, what a wonderful surprise. Come in, come in. How are you, honey?" "I'm good, Bren. Better than I've been in a long time." I told her everything. Every detail, from the conversation I'd overheard at Helen's house to the confrontation with Michael and the decision to donate everything. Brenda listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, offering me more coffee when my voice broke during the hardest parts. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished, "you have no idea how much courage you have. I don't know if I could have done what you did." "Of course you could have, Bren. When you have nothing left to lose, it's easier to be brave." "That's not true. You have everything to lose. You have your dignity, your self-respect, your peace. And you chose to keep them instead of continuing to be a victim." Her words hit me deeply. For weeks I had felt as if I had lost everything. But Brenda was right. I had gained something far more valuable than what I had lost. "So what are you going to do now?" she asked. "Live for myself, for the first time in 35 years, just for me." That same week, I started doing things I had dreamed of, but never allowed myself. I went to the Met to see a Frida Kahlo exhibit I had wanted to visit for months. I walked through the city without a schedule, stopping at the Strand bookstore to browse through books I didn't have to buy for anyone else. I signed up for a French pastry workshop at a local arts center. I had always cooked out of necessity, but I'd never had time to cook for pleasure. The first day I was nervous, feeling out of place among the other students, who were younger and seemed more self-assured. But the teacher, a French woman named Madame Dubois, immediately put me at ease. "Madame Sarah, what is your experience in the kitchen?" 35 years of cooking for my family, Madame." "Ah, then you already know the most important thing, to cook with love. Now, we will learn to cook with joy." In that first class, we made chocolate macarons. My hands, accustomed to preparing practical home-style meals, moved clumsily with the delicate French techniques. But when I tasted my first macaron, perfectly round and with that intense chocolate flavor that melted in my mouth, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. "It is delicious, Madame Sarah. Who will you be taking them to?" "To no one, Madame. I'm going to eat them myself." She looked at me with a knowing smile. What a wonderful idea. The best cook is the one who knows how to enjoy her own food. On Friday of that week, while strolling through the Grand Army Plaza Green Market buying ingredients to practice my workshop recipes, I ran into Carmen, the vendor who always saved the best tomatoes for me. "Oh, Mrs. Miller, So good to see you. It's been a few days. How are you? Very well, Carmen. Better than ever. And your boy? Still just as busy? My boy doesn't live with me anymore, Carmen. I'm a free woman now. Good for you. It's about time you thought about yourself. Women like us are always taking care of others, and sometimes we forget that we deserve to be cared for too. She gave me the most beautiful tomatoes from her stand, as always. But this time when I paid for them, it wasn't with the rush of someone who has to get home quickly to cook for someone else. It was with the calm of someone who has all the time in the world to choose exactly what she wants. That evening, as I was preparing dinner just for myself, pan-seared salmon with steamed vegetables, something I'd never cooked because Michael didn't like fish, I received a call from Helen. Sarah, how are you? Michael told me you two had a huge fight. We did, Helen. Oh, Sarah. Kids sometimes say things they don't mean. You know how Michael is. He's always been a bit explosive. But he adores you. Helen, did you hear what Michael said at your party? What thing? About me. About what he wished would happen to me. There was a long silence. Sarah, I did hear something, but I thought— You thought what? That it was okay? That it was normal for a son to wish for his mother's death? No, Sarah, of course not. But I thought maybe he was exaggerating, that he'd had a bad day. Bad days don't justify wishing death on anyone, Helen. Especially not the person who gave you life. You're right. What he said was terrible. But you've always been such a good mother. So self-sacrificing. Exactly. And that's over. I'm not going to sacrifice myself anymore for someone who doesn't value it. So what are you going to do? Live, Helen. Simply live. When I hung up, I realized a full week had passed without that tightness in my chest that had accompanied me for years. For the first time in decades, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see an exhausted woman living for others. I saw a 58-year-old woman with a whole life ahead of her, a life that finally belonged only to her. That night I went to bed early, but before falling asleep, I sat on my bed for a while, looking out the window at the city lights. Tomorrow would be another day of freedom, another day without having to worry about anyone's needs but my own. For the first time in my adult life, the future didn't scare me. I was curious about it. 6 months later, while sipping coffee on the terrace of the small apartment I'd rented in Greenpoint, I received an unexpected call. It was the voice of a nervous young woman who identified herself as Gabriella, Michael's girlfriend. Mrs. Miller, I'm sorry to bother you. I got your number from Helen. I need to talk to you. Go ahead, young lady. It's about Michael. He's in a really bad way. Since you left, he hasn't been the same. He's depressed. He's lost a lot of weight. He barely leaves his apartment. I listened to her words with a calmness that surprised me. A few months ago, knowing Michael was suffering would have made me run to comfort him, to fix whatever was wrong. Now, I only felt a distant pity, like the kind you feel for a stranger going through a hard time. And what do you want me to do, Gabriella? Talk to him. Forgive him. He realizes he was wrong, but he's too proud to call you. Did he ask you to call me? No. Well, not exactly. But I see him suffering every day. He talks about you constantly. Says he made the biggest mistake of his life. Gabriella, can I ask you something? Of course. Has he ever told you that he loves me? That he misses me? That he values everything I did for him for 35 years? She was silent for a moment. He says he doesn't understand why you reacted that way. That it was an overreaction to donate everything. That you should have understood he was just angry when he said those things. There was the answer. 6 months later, Michael still didn't understand that the problem wasn't a comment made in a bad moment. The problem was years of contempt disguised as normalcy. Gabriella, I'm going to give you some advice. Run. Run as far away from that man as you can. Because if that's how he treats the woman who gave birth to him and raised him, imagine how he'll treat you when you're no longer useful to him. Mrs. Miller, and you can tell Michael that his mother died the day he wished for it. What's left is me. Sarah Miller, a 58-year-old woman who finally learned to live for herself. I hung up the phone and continued sipping my coffee, watching people walk by on the street below. My new life had taken on a completely different rhythm. I no longer woke up thinking about what Michael might need that day. I woke up thinking about what I wanted to do. I had found a part-time job at a French patisserie in the West Village. Madame Dubois, my workshop teacher, had recommended me when she learned I needed an income after donating my properties. It was a peaceful job, surrounded by beautiful pastries and customers who appreciated the delicacy of French baking. Madame Sarah, the owner had said during my interview, Madame Dubois tells me you have magical hands for pastry, but above all, that you cook from the heart. That is what we look for here. For the first time in my life, I was working because I wanted to, not out of desperate need. The pay was modest, but enough for my simple expenses. And more importantly, every day I showed up, someone was happy to see me. My weekends were dedicated to the foundation. Eleanor had invited me to participate as a volunteer counselor, helping other women who had been through situations similar to mine. It was painful, but healing to hear stories like my own. Children who disappeared after receiving everything. Families who only sought out their mothers when they needed money. Women who had dedicated their entire lives to being useful to others and suddenly found themselves completely alone. Sarah, Rose, a 62-year-old woman who had just come to the foundation, told me, "How did you make the decision to leave? I've felt invisible in my own home for years, but I don't know how to get out." Rose, the first step is to understand that you are not responsible for your children's happiness. You've already done your job as a mother. You raised them, you educated them, you gave them love. If they treat you poorly now, that's their problem, not yours. But you always think that maybe if you do things differently? No, my dear. If you've given love for decades and they respond with contempt, the problem isn't the amount of love you give. The problem is the quality of the people they chose to become. These conversations helped me as much as they helped the women who came seeking help. Every story I heard confirmed that I had made the right decision, that I wasn't crazy or a bad mother. I was a woman who had reclaimed her dignity. One Thursday afternoon, while walking through Prospect Park after work, I came across a scene that broke my heart in the most beautiful way. A grandmother was sitting on a bench, reading a story to her 6-year-old granddaughter. The little girl was snuggled up against her, completely absorbed in the story, occasionally interrupting to ask questions that the grandmother answered with infinite patience. When they finished reading, the girl gave her grandmother a kiss on the cheek and said, "Grandma, you're the best storyteller in the whole world." The look of joy on that woman's face made me understand something fundamental. I was never going to have that experience. I would never be the beloved grandmother eagerly awaiting her grandchildren's visits. But I also understood that it was better to have no grandchildren than to have grandchildren who saw me as a burden, as their father had. That night, in my small apartment filled with plants I'd bought to brighten the space, I sat down to write in the journal I'd started keeping since my separation from Michael. Writing helped me process everything I had lived through, to understand my own transformation. "Dear Diary," I wrote that night, "today I understood that motherhood is not a life sentence where one commits to suffer forever. Motherhood is giving love during a child's formative years, and then trusting that love has helped them become good people. If it didn't, it's not the fault of the love that was given. It's the responsibility of the one who chose not to value it." 3 days later, I had an unexpected visitor. It was Saturday morning, and I was making French toast for breakfast when there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I found Helen, holding a bag of pastries from her favorite Italian bakery and a nervous smile. "Sarah, can I come in? I brought cannolis, the kind you like." "Of course, come on in." She sat in my small living room, looking around curiously. My new apartment was a quarter of the size of my old one, but I had decorated it entirely to my taste. Light colors, plants everywhere, books arranged on simple shelves, photographs of places I had visited on my new city wanderings. "Your place is so lovely. It looks so peaceful." "It is peaceful, Helen. For the first time in decades. Sarah, I came to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For not defending you at my party. For hearing what Michael said and doing nothing. For trying to convince you to forgive him when he clearly didn't deserve forgiveness." Her words surprised me. Helen had always been the diplomatic sister, the one who avoided conflict and tried to keep the family peace at all costs. "Helen, you didn't have to defend me. That was my battle to fight." "Yes, I did. Because you're my sister. And what he said was horrible. But I was scared to get involved. Scared it would cause a scene at my party. So what changed?" I've seen how you are now and how he is. You look radiant, Sarah. You look like a woman who has finally found herself, and he looks like someone who lost the most valuable thing he had and doesn't know how to get it back. Because he can't get it back, Helen. Some things when they break can't be fixed. Not even if he came and truly apologized? Do you think he would come to truly apologize? Or would he come to ask me to come back because he needs me for something? Helen fell silent because we both knew the answer. Sarah, she finally said, I want you to know that I really admire what you did. I know it wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. Thank you, Helen. That means a lot to me. Are you happy? I'm free. And freedom, when you've lost it for so long, feels a lot like happiness. After Helen left, I thought about her question. Was I happy? The answer was complex. It wasn't the bubbling happiness of someone who has everything they ever dreamed of. It was something deeper, the satisfaction of someone who is finally living in line with her values, who no longer betrays herself to please others. That night before sleeping, I went out onto my small balcony. From there, I could see a sliver of the New York City sky, always illuminated by the lights of 8 million people living their own stories. I thought of all the women who, at that very moment, were going through what I had gone through, mothers wearing themselves out for ungrateful children, wives erasing themselves for selfish husbands, women who had forgotten they had a right to be happy too. And I thought about what I would say if I could speak to all of them at once. It's not too late. It's never too late to choose to respect yourself. Love that isn't returned isn't love. It's a useless sacrifice. And you, all of you, deserve better. In the distance, the city lights flickered like earthbound stars. Tomorrow would be another day of my new life, and for the first time in decades, that didn't fill me with fear or overwhelming responsibility. It filled me with pure anticipation. In the end, Michael had gotten what he wanted, a life without his mother. And I had gotten something I never knew I needed, a life without a son who saw me as a burden. We had both won, except I had won so much more. Have you ever experienced something like this? Or do you know someone who has? Tell me your story in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it.